Hello everyone, it's Emily, and if you can hear it in the background, you know that it is now officially cicada season here where we live. Alright, and it's also the season of when the tomatoes start to sprawl and get really crazy. So I want to give you just a quick tutorial and a few tips on pruning tomatoes, because unless you have tons of space and you want to just let your tomato plants grow completely naturally, you're going to want to prune them, because if you let them vine naturally, even if you train them up a trellis like this, you keep tying them up, they're still going to go sideways. See, like this one, I could tie it to this post, but then it might work, but then it'll be awfully close to this other stem, and if you get things too close together, then you encourage disease. So the first thing, and I want to let you know that I pruned off an entire branch from this tomato. I've also pruned off a bunch of suckers, and that's what we'll talk about first. What are the suckers on a tomato? Well, they are the stems that grow in between two other branches. Where two branches meet and form a corner, another branch will try to grow. And that is where I cut off a rather big sucker. This one was a smaller sucker. But look, see that leaf there? Even though I've cut off a sucker there, there's already a leaf trying to grow. So I'm going to pull that off. So that's number one to do with the pruning. This sucker has gotten kind of big. I'm going to use my pruning shears for that one. La-di-da. Cut it off. There we go. Do I have any more suckers on this tomato? See, this is a sucker that's grown up here that I didn't catch in time. I'm going to leave that be. But yeah, once it gets warm enough for tomatoes to be really happy, there's a sucker there. They grow like crazy, and if you really want to be judicious in keeping your plants pruned, you really need to come out probably twice a week. At least once, but twice is even better. Alright, so that's pruning tip number one. Now, I once read an article where the person who wrote the article argued, hey, let me back up. I should have told you the original reason people used to think you needed to take the suckers off the tomatoes is because the suckers would allow the more foliage to grow, and if you let more foliage grow, you'd have less fruit. But that's generally proven not to be true. Tomatoes will grow; they'll keep growing foliage and fruit. So you don't necessarily have to take out the suckers. It's just a matter of how much space you have for the tomatoes. Also, it's a matter of watering, which I'll get to in a moment. But I'm going to let this branch be here. But if any other branches come out from the bottom, okay, like this one, and this is sad because it already has buds on it, but I don't want it to start. It will eventually, just take over this whole area and make a mess. So, and you can see I already cut off. There, I had already cut off a branch coming out. So that one's gonna go bye-bye. So, yes. So you can let, if you have limited space, you can let, one or two extra branches, extra stems other than the main one that comes up from the ground. Otherwise, all the other ones you're going to want to prune. Alright, so this one I'm letting be okay for now. It's not too bad, and I'm sure as the tomato grows, I'm going to have to tie it up to the trellis. Alright, just found some more suckers here. Alright, so that's the second tip about pruning, is pruning off the extra branches that are growing that will take up too much space. And the third thing that you want to prune from tomatoes is just the leaves. You can do it. Now, like with oh, here's another sucker. I'm going to get that. With cucumbers, you have to be careful because I've read that the leaves, the cucumber leaves that grow after the fruit, where a fruit is growing, those leaves that are just after where a fruit is growing, all the light and the nutrients or whatever in those leaves actually help the fruit behind it to grow. So you have to be careful with, say, the cucumber and probably melon leaves. But with tomatoes, it doesn't matter. When you cut off some of the leaves, and you have to be careful, especially if you're a beginner, you need to make sure that you're actually cutting off leaves and not a branch that has fruit on it like this and it's tangled up. And I've only got 2 hands, and one has the pruning shears and one holding the camera. There we go. Okay, but as you can see, this one actually has fruit. This is actually some of my original fruit that started growing. And this is a leaf that can come off. All right. I usually don't do too much taking off the leaves, but one good reason to do it is, oh, another sucker, is that the more foliage you have, the more water the plant will require. So, the fruit and the foliage will be competing for water. So that's one reason to just simply cut off some of the, oh, that's like a branch off this branch. I don't want that there. See this here? See, it's starting off this branch that's already sprawling off, and it's going to become its own branch with tomatoes, and it's going to be a little bit too much, so no. See, I'm right-handed, and I'm holding my camera with my right hand, and I'm trying to prune with my left, so it's a little awkward. All right. And now, this one here, it looks like it has disease, whether it's blight or anthracnose. Yeah, there's more than that. But if you cut off diseased plants, you just need to throw those away. You might be able to get away with composting them if you know how to compost so that your compost pile gets really hot. We have 5 acres, so what I do is I take diseased foliage and I put them like way, way at the opposite end of our property from the garden. All right. And by the way, that is not unusual. It's kind of disappointing because I have been spraying, but it is totally not unusual for that. That's just usually par for the course in both North Texas and here, that as soon as the fruit starts growing, the disease shows up, or even the disease will show up before the fruit comes. Maybe the spraying has helped because it didn't show up until the fruit started to get big. Anyway, that's basically how to prune a tomato. So, those 3 ideas, and eventually I will take off more leaves, but I want to have the camera down so I can use my right hand. It is several days later from when I was making the rest of the video, and the tomatoes needed pruning again, and it occurred to me that there are 2 other reasons and ways that you want to pay attention to when you're pruning the tomatoes. The first is the final reason, the final thing to look at when you're pruning, and you might notice that now these plants have a lot fewer leaves than when I showed them to you a few days ago, is to prune them for airflow, because when tomato plants start to grow nuts in the middle of the growing season, the foliage goes everywhere, and so I should maybe have also pruned one of these, but they start, you'll have a leaf from one branch reaching over and hitting the leaf of another branch. And over here I have a marigold growing, and I have pruned off some leaves so that the marigold can get some sunshine so it'll finally blossom. That's not super important, but mainly for the airflow of the plant. And also if you have two tomato plants, now these are actually spaced a decent amount apart, but because this one is spreading, it had some leaves and maybe a branch anyway, but the two of them had leaves that were touching, so I had to do some pruning so that the leaves between the two plants weren't touching. But basically, you don't want leaves crossing over each other, is basically the thing. Proper airflow can either prevent disease from happening in the first place, or if you live in an area like I do where disease is going to happen no matter what you do, then that kind of pruning, allowing good airflow among the foliage, will slow down the progress of disease. Anyway, if this video has helped you, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure to also subscribe if you want more simple and helpful vegetable gardening tips like this one. I'll see you for the next video, and in the meantime, happy gardening.